So why are tech startups so important? And where do we stand as the Netherlands? The world's leading companies 20 years ago are not the same today. Times are changing and technology is moving faster than it ever has done before. Is this just a software thing? Well, no. Most markets are being challenged by fast-growing companies. If you look at cars, it's NIO and Tesla. If you look at cargo, it's Flexport, or entertainment, Netflix and YouTube. And in many more industries, technology and startups are reinventing the world. They are addressing some of the world's biggest challenges and driving global transitions in energy, in food, logistics, in retail, mobility, and applying cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence, virtual reality, quantum computing. So, where does that leave the Netherlands? And how do we make sure that we're not left behind as consumers instead of the builders of technology? How do we stay relevant as a nation or a continent, competitive as an economy, as the US and China are increasingly dominating the world economy? Well, times may be changing, and the Netherlands is seeing a new wave of companies that start to compete at a global scale, that started out as small startups and now bring their technology to billions. Moreover, startups create more jobs, are more productive, grow faster, and inject flexibility and resilience into the labor market. And when we talk about tech and about startups and about innovation, we mean the new economy and our ability to keep up. To play big in tech means to stay competitive, remaining relevant, creating the jobs of the future, staying in control of our data, our values, creating opportunities for future generations right here in the Netherlands and Europe. So there are a few reasons why startups are an integral part of the future of our success as a country. Now let's look at the status quo of the Dutch tech ecosystem and see where we're at. So let's start by looking at how the Netherlands startup ecosystem has progressed in 2020 and how it's performing compared to its European neighbors. The good news is that the Netherlands continues to catch up with the larger ecosystems that surround it, punching above its weight in relative terms. With our startup genome ranking continuing to be one of the fastest rising in Europe and the world at large. Through the COVID-19 crisis, the number of startups continued to grow at a steady pace of 6%, now sitting at about 10,000 active tech ventures in the Netherlands. This breaks down roughly to 8.7 thousand pre-seeds, about 1,000 startups, and almost 200 scale-ups. Which immediately shows one of our major challenges. The ratio of companies that get to the scale-up phase is consistently too low, at less than 2%. The positive news is, however, that we have a large pool of potential solutions that are ripe for scaling. So far, the Dutch tech startup ecosystem has created 17 unicorns. Not all exits can be unicorns though. From 2005, we have witnessed a steady rise in exits with 137 in 2020, mostly by acquisition. 2020 was another record year for investment in the Dutch startup ecosystem, even with the ongoing pandemic happening all around us, with over 1.8 billion euros raised. If we break this down by funding type, you can see the Series A with 41 rounds at the total of 335 million and Series B with 20 rounds at a total of 469 million. And in terms of investment types, venture capital was by far the leading form of capital, bringing in 1.2 billion of the 1.8 billion invested. Investments cover all economic sectors, but health tech, enterprise software have attracted by far the most capital, doubling the volume compared to earlier years. Other strong sectors being fintech, transportation, and food. With funding comes growth, comes employment, and it's interesting to look at the company maturity versus the number of employees. The tech sector has created over 100,000 jobs, divided over pre-seed with about 43,000, startups about 39,000, and scale-ups with 20,000 jobs, showing that 2% of the total companies created nearly 20% of the jobs. Now that we've seen a few basic numbers about the Dutch tech ecosystem, let us look how this compares to Europe and the rest of the world. The good news is that we rank number 3 in Europe for combined ecosystem value. At 232 billion euros, only ranked behind the UK and Germany. And it's good to note that a big part of this valuation comes from Takeaway.com, Booking, and Adyen being among the biggest unicorns to be born from the European tech ecosystem. What we see is that although it was a record year for investment in the Netherlands, we still can't compete with the larger ecosystems. The UK, as number 1, saw startups raise a staggering 14 billion. And even on a per capita basis, we see that the Netherlands is behind the likes of Sweden and Finland. More concerning is that the Netherlands lags behind in deep tech investments. So although we have a high number of startups, when looking at other countries, the data tells us that they aren't raising enough money. We've seen record numbers across Europe, and it's safe to say that as a continent, we're picking up the pace. But we are still far from catching up with the US and China. And we know through the recent Atomico report that Europe accounts for around 1/4 of global GDP, yet its share in venture capital is only 13%. More specifically, we see the US tech still attract more than 50% of VC money globally. The key indicator here is the startup to scale-up conversion ratio. In the Netherlands, the number of companies that go from being a startup to converting to a scale-up is only 16%. This number in the US is a massive 51%. This difference is further compounded when you look at the average deal size, with the Netherlands at 5.9 million, Europe at 7.5 million, and the US at a staggering 23.4 million. Important to note is that the average startup scale-up conversion rate doesn't tell the whole story of the Dutch startup ecosystem. We continue to gain ground in sectors such as health tech with 25% conversion and fintech with a 26% conversion. We clearly see for the ecosystem to continue to grow, more capital is needed and ticket sizes must be increased to stay competitive. So let's look now at where the funding comes from. The Netherlands has 75 Dutch LPs that have committed capital to VC funds. This is only 12% of all active LPs in the Netherlands. In comparison, the UK has 1,000 LPs that committed capital to venture capital. 18% of their total active LPs. So it's no surprise why they are the most funded ecosystem in Europe. Further to this point, only 27% of the commitments to venture capital from Dutch LPs are to VC funds inside the Netherlands, whereas in France and the UK this number is over 60% nationally, keeping funds raised in the country of origin. Our challenge now is to attract more investors and to keep investments within the Netherlands. Now let's zoom into one of the areas not receiving enough funding, deep tech. With only 267 million raised in 2020, the Netherlands sits at number 7 in Europe, raising only 25% of what French deep tech companies raised in 2020. And there's no doubt about the potential. Dutch companies applied for nearly 7,000 patents in 2019, sitting only behind deep tech leaders Switzerland and Germany respectively. Beyond capital, the lack of diversity in the tech sector remains a big challenge. To cover just one area, the Netherlands has the highest number of male employee to one female employee when compared across Europe. Specifically looking at tech jobs such as software engineers, product owners and growth hackers. Alongside this, we see only 11.9% of founders are female, with them receiving a meager 2% of all Dutch VC capital invested in Netherlands. This also comes at no surprise when we see that 94% of Dutch partners at VC firms are male. That means we're leaving a huge portion of the population at the table and not utilizing the talent the Netherlands has to offer. If we are to further compete on a European level, this needs to change. And it needs to change fast. So now we've seen where the Netherlands is at, how we measure up to Europe, and now is the time to understand the bigger picture. Overall, we have our challenges, but more importantly, we have huge opportunities. We're coming through the COVID-19 crisis fighting, and we're poised for further growth. We're full of startups across all sectors with deep concentrations in enterprise software, fintech, and health tech. With a slow but building position in IP development in key enabling technologies. However, tech companies are starving for investment, they lack diversity, are strained for talent, slow to expand internationally, while technology is mostly locked up in our universities and large companies. There's work to be done, but we can build on our success and failures together. Now let's take a look at our future and what we'll be doing at Techleap with you to accelerate the Dutch startup ecosystem. As we move into 2021, tech is entering a new era. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how technology is not only a nice to have, but essential to keeping our lives, our communities, our businesses moving forward. 2020 demonstrated the power of deep tech, whether that's the first mRNA vaccine created or OpenAI releasing a language model using deep learning to produce human-like text. And 2021 is expected to produce many more of such breakthroughs. Where does the Netherlands want to be? Do we want to be the creators or the consumers of deep tech? Do we want to be in the lead or are we contented to follow? Are we going to be part of the solution or do we stick with the problem? I think the choice has already been made. Therefore, it's time to act. Techleap and partners suggest taking the challenge head-on in 2021 by establishing an international network of experts, connectors and mentors, by supporting the setup of 2 deep tech scale-up funds whilst helping pension funds invest more in venture capital, by setting up a diversity and inclusion initiative focused on tech scale-ups similar to the FundRide program we have for investors, by attracting more talent to the Netherlands with a career site showcasing all the vacancies from leading Dutch scale-ups, building a program with leading incubators to scale science-based deep tech startups and improving tech transfer practices in the Netherlands, running and scaling the RISE program and building its community, and getting a new fiscal policy for stock options and risk capital adopted, creating a single community platform to connect the Dutch tech ecosystem in one place, to name just a few of the most important actions that we're planning for 2021. Obviously, we're not alone, and we cannot achieve our objectives without our partners. Founders, think big, organize for scale, pay back and forward, learn from peers. Venture capitalists, invest in diverse teams and support ventures as they scale. Government, remove hurdles and improve incentives, make entrepreneurship a real career path in formal education. City mayors, become attractors of talent, launching customers, but don't force companies to stay within your geographic boundaries. Universities, embrace entrepreneurship. And regional hubs, don't compete among each other, but share expertise and collaborate. It is our duty to make sure that the Netherlands continues its growth from capital invested to unicorns born. Like never before, we have all the raw ingredients necessary to build a world-leading ecosystem. Now we need to think bigger, empower our leaders in tech, and come together as one.